Next, on Currents News, the death toll rises from a condo complex collapse.
Asking to the Lord hope and faith.
One Catholic church in the area has 10 families missing in the rubble. Plus, for the second time in 2 months, a tourist is hit by gunfire in the middle of Times Square. Police will flood the area to keep people safe. Religious Freedom Week sets its sights on Christians in Iraq.
Christianity itself is under attack. Even though it's not very close to us, it's happening.
We speak with groups working to free them from religious persecution. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken has a lengthy meeting with Pope Francis. The news starts right now.
We're racing against time to get to the bottom of the building.
Survivors of the Surfside, Florida building collapse described the terrifying moments the condo began to crumble around them. Good evening, I'm Christine PERSICHETTE. A 10th person is confirmed dead as crews pulled their body from the collapsed building. 24-hour rescue efforts as first responders stress they could still find survivors in the rubble, despite no one being pulled out alive since Thursday. Right now, 151 people are still unaccounted for as family members still try to hold out hope. There is a daunting study in contrasts in Surfside, from enormous pieces of concrete which must be moved.
One of the pieces they were able to pull out because of the trench weighed about 12,000 pounds.
To a specially trained dog brought in from Mexico to search the smallest spaces for any survivors.
We bring the dogs to smell.
Global efforts and round-the-clock hope that rescues could still happen, despite the reality none have for days.
The search continues and it will not stop until there's a resolution.
More family members of the missing visited the site Monday after about 200 saw the damage for themselves over the weekend.
It was really hard to see up close. There's a lot of rubble.
Amelia Cordozo's Aunt Maria is one of the many unaccounted for, leaving Amelia, like so many others, to grapple with worry, wondering why this happened.
They knew in 2018 that there was a massive threat to the building, that there was damage, and yet nothing was done.
A structural engineering firm noted in a 2018 report, quote, significant cracks and breaks in the concrete that needed extensive repairs. Meeting minutes show, despite the report, 2 days later, a Surfside town official told residents their building was in very good shape.
Still can't believe I saw a building collapse.
More communities are now taking a closer look at their building safety as a result of this collapse. Local churches are coming together to show solidarity and pray for the victims of the collapse. Parishioners filled St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Miami Beach for a vigil. The church says 12 of its families lived in the building and only 2 of them are accounted for right now. An 11-year-old girl who received her first communion in the church. Her mother, father, and 4-year-old sister are among the missing. Clergy at the church say this is a good time for parishioners to come to God.
It's a good moment to renew our faith, because we believe in God in any time. In difficult times and good times, and this is a difficult time, it's time for trusting Him.
The pastor left a binder to fill with names of missing friends or family so the congregation can pray for them. Pope Francis is joining the church in praying for those affected by the building collapse. The Holy Father sending a message to Miami Archbishop Thomas Wensky, saying he offers gratitude for first responders and, quote, offers heartfelt prayers that Almighty God will grant eternal peace to those who have died, comfort those who mourn their loss, and strength to all those affected by this immense tragedy. Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Miami has been helping with relief efforts since the building collapsed. They've been working to help displaced residents and have some temporary housing set up. They are adding counseling services for anyone in need. If you'd like to help them with their continued efforts, you can donate on their website, On this 7th day of Religious Freedom Week, we look to our brothers and sisters of faith across the globe who are struggling to express their beliefs because it would be dangerous for them to do so. Christian persecution is a topic that even the Pope has continually called attention to. Currents News' Jessica Easthope talks with experts about one of the most hazardous countries for Christians, Iraq.
Around the globe, hundreds of millions of Christians live in places where persecution is considered extreme, where believing in Christ is dangerous, and few are more hostile than Iraq.
The Christians have been in Iraq since the Apostles, and Christians have suffered greatly in the last 20th century, and that's shown by the number of people that have gone and have left.
At the turn of the century, Christians made up nearly 13% of the population in Iraq at more than 1 million. Today, they're under 1%. Only 270,000 are left.
And so there's only about a dozen families in Mosul.
Ed Clancy, the director of outreach for Aid to the Church in Need, says the United States' influence in Iraq caused a major shift.
The situation in Iraq was not good under Saddam Hussein, but the Christian population was surviving. Since then, it's been decimated, and this is because of the instability and other problems.
Christians and church leaders in Iraq were hopeful after Pope Francis's historic visit to the country in March. But Clancy says government control of economic and employment opportunities keep Christians down.
As their numbers decrease, they become more and more reliant on the government to support them and protect them, and the government has not.
Aid to the Church in Need has rebuilt thousands of Christian homes destroyed during the ISIS genocide, which ended in 2017. But terrorism and extremists are still the biggest threat to Iraqi Christians.
Displaced or refugees.
Clancy says people can still return, but that first requires helping the Christians currently in Iraq stay there.
We have to support those dedicated few to make sure we as a country speak up for them, and we as Christians and as Catholics do the same.
If the threats Iraqi Christians face persist, more will leave, and language, liturgy, and history will be lost. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Pope Francis putting the spotlight on persecuted Christians in Iraq and the Middle East during his Sunday Angelus. The Holy Father making a special appeal on the day of prayer for peace in the Middle East. The pontiff also sent a letter to the Catholic patriarchs of the region. Francis is calling on Christians throughout the world to pray for peace in the region.
Invito tutti a implorare la misericordia di Dio e la pace su quella regione. Il Signore sostenga gli sforzi di quanti si adoperano per il dialogo e la convivenza fraterna nel Medio Oriente, dove la fede cristiana è nata ed è viva, nonostante le sofferenze.
In the Holy Father's letter, he recalled his apostolic visits to the Middle East, saying, "Ever since the beginning of my pontificate, I have sought to be near to your sufferings." Our coverage of Religious Freedom Week will conclude tomorrow here on Currents News. We'll speak to a nun who won a free speech case at the Supreme Court, but is still concerned about the future. Again, that's Tuesday on Currents News. Pope Francis expressed his affection for Americans during a lengthy meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The closed-door discussion played out in a cordial atmosphere, according to bishops. Blinken is now the highest-ranking Biden administration official to speak with the pontiff. Vatican correspondent Justin McClellan has more on the meeting.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken had a private audience with Pope Francis this morning at the Vatican. They met for about 40 minutes, twice as long as the Pope reserves for foreign officials. Afterwards, the two exchanged gifts, and the Pope even gave him something to take home to his wife and children. Pope Francis and the U.S. Secretary of State exchanged greetings in English, but the Pope quickly switched back to Italian.
Because I don't speak English.
The Pope recalled his trip to the United States in 2015 during their meeting. The Secretary offered the Pope a statue of a dove carrying an olive branch, a symbol of peace and freedom. In return, the Pope gave Blinken a bronze sculpture with an engraving that reads, "Let us fill our hands with the hands of others." He also gave Secretary Blinken the significant texts of his pontificate, including the document on human fraternity he produced with the Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayeb of Egypt.
Laudato si, fratelli tutti, questo è l'accordo che ho fatto con il Grand Imam.
The Pope then gave him rosaries, which he blessed for the Secretary's family.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Prior to meeting with the Pope, Blinken met with the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and Foreign Minister Archbishop Gallagher. Secretary Blinken is finishing up a week-long tour through Europe to discuss rebuilding society after the pandemic. On Twitter, he said he was left speechless while touring the Sistine Chapel. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo traveled to Rome last October, but did not meet with Pope Francis. Now, as America's top diplomat continues his tour through Europe, it's still up in the air when the Biden administration will name a new U.S. ambassador to the Holy See. From the Vatican, Justin McClellan, Currents News.
Following Friday's sentencing of former officer Derek Chauvin, the Archbishop of St. Paul, Minneapolis, is praying for peace. In a statement, Archbishop Bernard Hebda saying, "Please join me in praying that the Lord will guide us in those conversations, no matter how difficult and uncomfortable they may be, while bringing consolation to the Floyd family, healing to our community, and protection to all who work for peace." Chauvin was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison for the murder of George Floyd. The Supreme Court will not hear the case about a transgender student who sued to use the bathroom that corresponds to his gender identity. In doing so, the justices upheld the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, which ruled in favor of the student. Though Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito say they would have taken up the case next term. This case concerns the scope of Title IX, which prohibits schools from discriminating on the basis of sex. The White House is defending airstrikes on Iranian-backed militia groups as necessary and appropriate. President Biden directed these strikes against facilities on the Iraq-Syria border that the administration says were used by militias for unmanned aerial vehicle attacks against U.S. personnel and facilities in Iraq.
We have been very clear, the President has been very clear throughout that we will act to protect U.S. personnel. And given these ongoing attacks that you referred to by Iran-backed groups targeting our interests in Iraq, he directed further military action. We've taken action previously to disrupt and deter.
This is not the first military action ordered by Biden as commander-in-chief. President Biden ordered airstrikes in February against another Iranian-backed militia in Syria that was suspected of firing rockets at American forces. There's a lot more news headed your way. Criticism and praise after Vice President Kamala Harris visits the border. We'll hear from someone on the ground in Guatemala. Meanwhile, Venezuelan migrants are crossing the U.S. border in droves. Why they're taking the dangerous journey. And it's an honor that's long overdue. A World War II vet finally recognized for his service. We'll meet him. Police are looking for the thief who stole a solid gold religious item from a Bronx church. The NYPD released this image of the suspect. They say he entered St. Barnabas Church in Woodlawn Heights Friday morning and waited around for an hour before going downstairs and taking a monstrance worth $10,000. That's the vessel in which the consecrated host is exposed for veneration. Police are also looking for this man who they say opened fire in Times Square Sunday, hitting a 21-year-old Marine who was visiting the city. According to the NYPD, the suspect pulled out a gun and started firing after an argument between CD vendors escalated. The victim, who is a Marine visiting to go to a baptism, will be okay. Police are still searching for the gunman. This is the second shooting in Times Square within the past 2 months. In May, a 4-year-old girl and 2 women were hospitalized after being hit by stray bullets. A man was later arrested in Florida following that shooting. Police say he was targeting his brother after an argument. Anyone with information about the shootings is asked to call the NYPD's Crime Stoppers hotline at 800-577-TIPS. Again, that's 800-577-8477. Kamala Harris made her first trip to the border since becoming vice president. Harris visited a migrant processing facility in El Paso Friday, where she spoke with U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents. Harris also met with Catholic leaders on the front lines of the border crisis, including Bishop Mark Seitz from El Paso. He later invited the VP to join Catholic bishops from the U.S. and Central America in an upcoming meeting in Washington to talk to Congress about the root causes of migration. Before visiting the border earlier this month, Vice President Harris went to Mexico and Guatemala. The locals there have mixed reactions over her visit. Some are hopeful for change, while others aren't convinced it will have any impact. We're joined now by Ramon Cadena, a human rights lawyer and former director of the International Commission of Jurists for Central America. And Ramon, as you know, the Vice President has been tasked with determining the root causes of migration to the U.S. While in Guatemala, she announced the formation of an anti-corruption task force. What has the reaction been to that? You know, what are people there saying to you?
The communities, what they have told me is that, of course, they wanted to speak to her and it was impossible to do that. So they remain skeptical, and they hope that this task force will create positive effects on their situation, but they are still very skeptical about it.
Now, during Harris's trip, after meeting with the president of Guatemala, she had a message for migrants heading to the southern border. Let's listen to what she said.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come.
All right, she says, do not come. Has that warning stopped anyone from making the journey to the U.S.? What have you seen?
Call will stop any journey because they prefer to do the journey, even though it is very, very, very dangerous. But it is more dangerous living in the places where they are. So I think that will not stop at all. It is not the way of stopping migration. Migration, it's a very complex movement, and if really Kamala and the government of the U.S. wants to stop the migration, the root causes really have to be solved.
You say it's more dangerous to live there. What is it like for people living in Guatemala?
Well, it's a very, very, very vulnerable population, at least the ones in the Department of Petén and also in other departments which create migrants. It's very, very vulnerable because all the institutions, they don't do anything. The justice institutions, they are co-opted. And I think that it's not a place to live and to have hope for the life.
So what do the people of Guatemala want to see done by the U.S.?
They would like to have a political support in order to stop organized crime. They would like also to have support in order to confront the root causes of migration. That is extreme poverty, that is also vulnerability, and also exclusion and racism. That is what they really want, a country that will understand their situation and will really try to overcome the root causes of migration.
So how are Catholics there keeping the faith?
Well, it's difficult for them because you know that a part of the Catholic community, they really try to make changes in the society, but there is another one which is very conservative and doesn't try to incorporate the changes. Our society needs these changes because, as you know, there is a lot of exclusion and a lot of racism, and Catholics, they pray a lot. They pray, they also believe in their own, sometimes in their own ancestral gods and authorities from the indigenous communities. So they would like that a country that would understand the situation, and also they would hope to get more support from the Catholic Church.
All right, well, we are certainly saying our prayers for everyone in Central America. Ramon Cadena, human rights lawyer and former director of the International Commission of Jurists for Central America. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for the space you gave to me.
Meanwhile, Venezuelans are crossing the U.S. border in record numbers. That's according to Customs and Border Protection. Just last month, more than 7,400 Venezuelans were encountered by agents along the U.S.-Mexico border. That's more than all 14 years for which records have existed. Nearly 17,300 Venezuelans have crossed since January, and those who are seeking asylum will likely be accepted, according to records from Syracuse University, which shows only 26% of requests from Venezuelans get rejected. Puerto Ricans still suffering during the pandemic are getting a big boost. The island will receive $4 billion in aid from the government, with roughly half of those funds coming from the American Rescue Plan Act, which is meant to help offset the pandemic's impact on the economy and public health. The American territory has reported nearly 123,000 confirmed cases and more than 2,000 COVID deaths. Still to come on Currents News, Holy Autograph, why so many fans are asking for this John Hancock. And we'll hear from a World War II vet honored 75 years after his service. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Crowds are once again flocking to the Vatican for the Pope's general audiences, with many pilgrims hoping to get an autograph. One author was lucky enough to get his latest book signed by Pope Francis. The book, titled If You Have Faith, shares the true story of a priest living in post-World War II Italy and the challenges he overcame in keeping his community together.
He signed
it for me. This here is the most important signature that I've ever received. Then he gave me a blessing, which, even for someone who is not a strong believer, is always a good thing. Either way, this encounter has transformed me, above all in a human sense, but perhaps even spiritually.
The book now includes a whole page displaying the Pope's iconic signature. In Louisiana, a 101-year-old World War II veteran is finally receiving his Purple Heart. But as Bess Casterly reports, the honor comes more than 75 years after he was wounded on the beaches of Normandy.
77 years after he was wounded in the Normandy invasion on D-Day, Baton Rouge native Johnny Jones was finally honored.
We should all pay tribute to Johnny Jones. He has stormed the beach at Normandy to free the world of Nazi oppression. He worked in the United States to make the words of the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution live for all Americans. We are, whoever you are, a better person, society, state, nation, world because of Johnny Jones.
The 101-year-old got his Purple Heart pinned on him by Senator Bill Cassidy in the presence of many influential lawmakers.
I just wanted to say to you today that I stand on your shoulders and I thank you for all of your hard work.
Jones was wounded by shrapnel from German airplanes and was on a ship when it hit a mine on Omaha Beach. But the fight continued when he returned back to the United States as African Americans face extensive discrimination. Jones went on to get his law degree at Southern and took on numerous civil rights cases, as well as representing the organizers of the Baton Rouge bus boycotts.
I know that I'm where I'm at home getting these praises, and I will continue to do, and I will continue to do everything that I can to inspire others to follow my footsteps.
That was Bess Casterly reporting. Jones also has 2 Bronze Stars and a Bronze Arrowhead, which he received previously. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine PERSICHETTE. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.